Story 1. When I was a kid, my dad took me to the video store on Friday nights. He went into the back room where only adults were allowed to look at pornography. Story 2. The phrase mint condition means like new because it describes the condition in which coins leave the mint. Story 3. I must have been around 11 or 12 years old when I realized that the phrase in order of appearance in the end credits of a movie does not list actors and actresses by attractiveness. Story 4. I learned a couple of years ago that it is not the mayor of bad news. It is actually the bearer of bad news. I am 25. Story 5. I only realized today that Walk the Plank on a boat was not a special edition pirates added to their ships as a means of public execution like a little wooden diving board. It is, in fact, the same plank as the gangplank you would normally use to get on and off the ship. It is not the presence of the plank that is threatening, but the absence of a dock. Story 6. You have to add a can of water to Campbell's soup. Apparently, I have been drinking straight condensed soup. Story 7. The first time I visited the United States, I was on my own in New York and visiting all the museums. I kept seeing signs that said no strollers and thought, because we call strollers prams in the United Kingdom, that people there were very strict about the amount of attention required to visit a museum. I actually pretended to show more interest than I had to avoid being thought of as someone out for a casual stroll. It was not until about day 3 that I saw a no strollers sign that included a graphic for idiots. Story 8. Calling someone simple is a polite way of saying they are stupid. My wife told me this after my grandmother had used that word for 28 years. Story 9. I realized at the age of 26 that narwhals are real because they were on an Octonauts episode. I walked into the room and said, "I thought they only do real animals on this show." The kid's dad replied, "You're joking, right?" Story 10. I kept seeing the same Chinese characters on restaurant signs and always wanted to know what they meant. A week ago, I learned they mean restaurant. Story 11. I used to pour water into our coffee maker one glass at a time. It was a real pain to fill the reservoir to the number of cups I wanted until I realized I could simply fill the carafe, which uses the same measurements, and pour from that. Story 12. I recently realized I was allergic to carrots. I had thought they only made people's mouths numb, like almonds. I also discovered I am allergic to almonds. Story 13. I always thought you can't have your cake and eat it too was a weird saying. Why wouldn't I be able to eat my slice of cake? It's mine. I later learned they mean you cannot eat the cake and still have it. Once it is eaten, it is gone. It is an idiom I did not understand until this year. I am 27. Edit. Thank you for the silver, kind stranger. Story 14. This sounds ridiculous, but I recently learned the term knee-jerk reaction. My whole life I had been saying it the way I heard it and thought it was spelled something like knee-jerk reaction, as if it were a psychology term. Story 15. English is not my first language, so I was amazed when I realized how words such as keys, kiss, he is, his, this, and these differ in pronunciation. I first noticed this when I told my boyfriend I wanted the keys and he looked very confused. I laughed. Now I try my best to pronounce them properly. Story 16. My whole life I thought pay-per-view was pay-per-view because I had only heard people say it and only recently saw it written. Story 17. My boyfriend did not know his electric toothbrush has a timer that signals at 1 and 2 minutes. He returned it and bought a new one, thinking it was broken, because the timer is just a brief pause or reduction in vibration. He would say, "What the heck? I literally just charged this," thinking the battery was already dying. One day I mentioned that I liked my toothbrush because it tells me when I have brushed long enough. It was like a light bulb went off in his head as he realized that was what his toothbrush had been doing all along. Story 18. The large wheel I turned as a child did not actually control the cruise ship. Story 19. I was 28 before I realized the meaning of the "why is 6 afraid of 7? Joke. I had always thought it was dumb. 7, 8, 9. Like you were just counting. The electric bill was not paid until later in my life. Story 20. I realized that birthday suit means being without clothes. I had thought it was a specific outfit you wore on your birthday each year. I found out when I asked what happens if you no longer fit into your birthday suit, and I laughed. Story 21. For the longest time I thought prima donna was prima donna. Story 22. The reason the cord hook on a vacuum spins is so you can remove the entire cord at once instead of unraveling it one loop at a time, as I have my whole life. Edit. I learned how to spell cord today. Story 23. I discovered that parents have children write letters to Santa so they can figure out what to buy them for Christmas. I can't believe I never put that together after 32 years on this earth. I always thought it was a fun little tradition. Story 24. My bedroom door was broken, and I finally got around to fixing it. I thought the knob was broken because it was pushed in toward the door, so I pulled it out and realized that this was how you lock the door. Story 25. It's called Men's Warehouse, not Men's Warehouse. It's been a couple of years since I realized this, and I think that's a clever name. Story 26. The villain in Halloween is not played by Michael Myers. Story 27. This little piggy didn't go to the market to do any shopping. Story 28. For a long time I thought to bust a nut meant you were going to kick a guy in the balls or beat him up. Anytime I was getting worked up or angry about someone, I would say, I'm going to bust his nut. Not knowing the real meaning. Nobody ever said anything, but my friends always laughed, so I assumed it was because I was being dramatic. Years later, a coworker was telling me about a rude person he had met, and I said, you should definitely bust that guy's nut. He paused and asked, do you even know what that means? Suffice it to say, I was extremely embarrassed and horrified when he explained it to me. For those who asked where I'm from, to bust a nut means to ejaculate or to masturbate someone else. Story 29. Super embarrassing. In college, I would order rum and cokes because I heard everyone else ordering the same. It turned out I had misheard them, and they were ordering rum and coke. Story 30. When teenagers said, we're going to toilet paper a house, I always thought they meant teepee. It never made sense to me because they were just covering a house with toilet paper. I recently realized the letters stood for toilet paper. I'm 27. Story 31. This girl I know has a dog named Diogi. 2 years after I met her and after spending time around Diogi, I was talking with her sister-in-law and said that I loved the name Diogi and asked how she came up with it. Her sister-in-law repeated Diogi. I said that it was a neat name. She started laughing and said, no, the letters D-O-G, the way you spell dog. I am still laughing out loud about it. Story 32. They put height measurement stickers next to gas station doors so that if a robber runs out of the store, people can get a better estimate of the robber's height. I always thought they were just a fun activity at road trip stops. Story 33. Not just now, I think it applies. I am in my mid-30s. I did not realize until I was about 28 that my mom's name was Betty and her sister's name was Wilma. They were named after the Flintstones. Yes, I asked. 2 years later, my Aunt Wilma told me they were fraternal twins. That was another thing I had not known for 30 years. A few people asked for context about the twin situation. My mom died when I was fairly young, so I never celebrated her birthday. I was not close to Wilma, so I did not celebrate hers either. I guess it was taken for granted in my family, so nobody mentioned it until she randomly brought it up. They both went by nicknames their whole lives, so I thought of them as Mom and Aunt Cookie. Aunt Cookie liked to bake. Story 34. When I was little, we had an Australian shepherd named Sydney. I did not understand why her name was Sydney until 18 years later. Story 35. I saw a place labeled Public House when I moved nearby recently. At that moment, I realized, oh, that's why they call them pubs. It's short for public house. Story 36. When people say tornadoes sound like trains, they do not mean the tornado is whistling choo-choo. Story 37. My sister asked me about 2.5 months ago, while we were watching John Wick 3 during the desert scene, if the sand was real. I asked, if what is real? She said, sand lands. And I burst out laughing and said, you mean deserts? Yes, they're real. Thinking about it now makes me laugh. Story 38. Up until last year, I thought National Geographic was a person, but then I realized the name referred to the magazine and organization. Story 39. I thought astigmatism was astigmatism, so I believed you could have 2 stigmatisms. Story 40. Today my friend realized pipe cleaners were originally for cleaning pipes. I had suggested using one to clean a metal straw because it is similar to a pipe. Story 41. People who always seem to know which way is north, south, east, or west aren't magically magnetic. They're just noticing where the sun is in the sky. Why did no one tell me? Story 42. I regret to inform you all that it just occurred to me the other day that the game is called Sims because they're in a simulation. I'm 26. Story 43. Getting your tires rotated means moving the tires to different positions on the car, not spinning the wheels. Story 44. I learned that allspice is a single spice, not a blend containing cinnamon and nutmeg. I do not consider cinnamon and nutmeg to be blends. Story 45. Personal injury lawyer commercials air more frequently during daytime television because their clients are injured, stuck at home, and watching television. Story 46. In Pokemon, there is the same type attack bonus. If a move matches the Pokemon's type, it deals 1.5 times damage. People often use a colloquial abbreviation for this, which I had thought referred only to the damage multiplier until I learned it expands to same type attack bonus. Story 47. My mom used to make my sisters and me belly buttons for dinner. I was 27 when I realized they were actually tortellini, but she knew we were silly kids and would refuse something with such a strange name even though it was delicious. Once she was making fried shrimp for dinner. My sisters and I hated fried shrimp, but we loved popcorn shrimp from Long John Silver's. We complained, so my mom said, "Okay, go away and I'll make you some popcorn shrimp instead." We left, and she later said she had taken half the shrimp she was already using, cut each piece in two, and then fried them that way. We cleaned the freaking bowl. We were silly kids, and she was a good, clever mom. Story 48. When I was a kid, my mom told me that my rabbit, Rosie, went to live on a farm. In my early 20s, I saw an episode of The Sopranos in which everyone made fun of Tony when he realized his dog did not actually go to a farm. That is when I realized Rosie had not gone to a farm either. I apologize for the cascade of terrible realizations my post caused. Truly, we sit on thrones of lies. It turns out many animals really do get to go live on farms, based on the responses, so that is nice. Story 49. Undergarments and socks protect areas that produce sweat and body odor, preventing these from reaching outer clothing and allowing you to change them more frequently. Story 50. Cat toes. I knew they existed, and I had seen them before. It's an obvious feature. A few weeks ago, I touched a cat's paw and laughed like it was the craziest thing ever. Then I shared my discovery. You're welcome. Rabbits and many other animals have similar toes. Story 51. The song "It's Getting Hot in Here" is not actually about the local temperature. I felt very stupid. Story 52. Cigarettes are called cigarettes because they are mini cigars. Story 53. In the movie Cats vs. Dogs, when the dog says "son of my mom," he is actually saying "son of a bitch." Story 54. I'm 30, and I realized a few months ago that howdy is cowboy for how do you do. Story 55. Tenure is the word, not tenure, which I thought teachers received as job security after they had worked for 10 years. Story 56. Say My Name by Destiny's Child is about a girl on the phone with her man, and she wants proof that he is not with another girl. Story 57. I realized when I was 16 that reindeer were real. I 100% thought they were fake, like elves and Santa Claus. I meant Claus. I had typed Claus on my phone. My bad. Story 58. This is silly, but I did not realize my mothers were gay until I was almost 14. I heard one of them say "I am gay" to my grandmother as a joke. I knew that lesbian, same-sex, and gay are similar terms, but it did not click until that moment that my mothers were lesbians. Story 59. The Grammy Awards are named for the gramophone trophies. Story 60. My friend, 22 years old, only realized last year that dolphins must live in the water and swim to survive. He thought they were land mammals that just like to swim for fun. Story 61. That Michelangelo's David is David from David and Goliath. How did I not know this? I thought it was just a man called Dave. I love how many of you learned this recently and also thought he was a man called Dave. We got there in the end. Better late than never. I never knew there was a sling. I thought it was his trousers. I never saw the rocks. I am going to need some more Dave's not here. Man comments before this post is complete. Story 62. American Express and its abbreviation refer to the same company. I have been telling customers in Australia, yes, we accept both for 4 years. Story 63. Okay, this was a couple of years ago, but it was something I realized way too late in my life. You're supposed to use the towel to dry yourself after a shower. I was just wrapping it around myself and sitting and walking around in it until I air dried. Story 64. I have lived in a part of Chicago called Greektown for 8 years and never realized the blue and white Christmas lights were meant to represent the colors of its flag. It just dawned on me today. Story 65. I'm 53 now, but I was 50 when I realized the little piggy that went to market wasn't fucking shopping. Story 66. The division symbol is a blank fraction with dots replacing the numerator and denominator. Story 67. My husband just realized that Q is pronounced like the word Q, not like Quay. He was amazed. Story 68. Jessica Rabbit is not a rabbit. She took Roger Rabbit's last name. Story 69. Alcohol doesn't freeze in a regular freezer. Edited to add. I was referring to drinks with high alcohol content, not beer and wine. Story 70. To remove the plastic cap on top of a deodorant stick, simply twist the bottom a few times. Laughing my ass off. Story 71. The lead singer of Blur is also the lead singer of Gorillaz. Thank you, kind stranger, for the gold. Story 72. I did not know the characters on Family Guy had accents. I live in New England and was watching with my wife, who is not from here. She said they really nailed the accents. I asked what accents. It surprised me when she explained that not everyone talks like that, and I laughed. Story 73. I live in Denmark. English is not my native language, and I just realized that weekend means the end of the week. Story 74. When I realized that the words I use all the time are painfully literal in their meaning, I feel I've had a radical realization, but I'm probably just dense. For example, breakfast literally means breaking your fast, and afternoon means after the noon hour. Story 75. This will make me seem dumb, but I recently realized why pickles do not come fresh. Story 76. Story time. When I was little, I hated toast. My parents tried to make me eat it, but I refused. My grandmother decided to try something different. She took toast, cut it into tiny squares, put butter on them, and called them little pillows. I ate them all the time. Only now, at 22, did I realize it was just toast. Story 77. I was a voracious reader and was well ahead of the curve during school. But I did not realize until age 50 that there are two words, discreet and discreet. One website said the trick to remembering them is that the two ES stay together when they want to whisper a secret. Story 78. Oh, you want a doozy? For years I did not realize it was Mike Myers playing both Austin Powers and Dr. Evil. I do not know how I missed it, but it never occurred to me that it was the same actor. I felt like a right royal twat when someone pointed it out to me. Story 79. I have been using Reddit for a year, and only just realized that the double arrow icon in the bottom right skips down to the next thread. I spent so much time scrolling to find the next top-level comment. Story 80. The app Tinder is called Tinder because the name means to spark a flame, like starting a romantic interest. There is even a fire symbol. I felt stupid, laughing out loud. Story 81. When the kids catch their mom kissing Santa Claus, it is because Santa is their dad dressed up, not because Santa and mom have a once-yearly toured affair. Story 82. Mustard gas does not actually contain or smell like mustard. Story 83. Saturday Night Live cast members are listed in alphabetical order in the opening credits. I have been watching for 30 years. Story 84. The abbreviation used in company names stands for established, not estimated. I mistakenly thought the owners had forgotten exactly when their company was founded and had simply estimated 1932. It was not until I saw established 2018 that it dawned on me that they could not have forgotten. They had founded their company last year. By the way, I am in my mid-30s. Story 85. I did not realize that buy one, get one was an abbreviation until I started my first retail job at age 19. I thought all the Payless ads for buy one, get one 50% off were advertising a brand of shoe called Buy One, Get one that was apparently always half off. Story 86. Why are donut holes called donut holes? I always thought it was stupid because they're shaped like balls, not holes. Story 87. Forrest Gump always knew what love was. It was Jenny who did not. Story 88. The only person who didn't think I had a drinking problem was me. Story 89. I learned from a similar thread, but I was 40 years old before I realized that the gas gauge has an arrow indicating which side the fuel cap is on. Story 90. The yellow dandelion and the white seed head you blow on to make a wish are the same plant. I did not realize until my senior year of high school that they are different stages of the same life cycle. Story 91. English is not my first language. I have just realized that all the days of the week end with day. Story 92. Disagreeable, domineering, hungry, jeans, ask, encourage, strong, plants, water, automatic. Story 93. It is called a department store because there are separate departments within the store. I recently had a sudden clarence moment about that. Story 94. Babies and plants require a great deal of care, and both live in a place called a nursery. Story 95. The clock icon on the Apple iPhone operating system actually shows the time, and the hands move. Story 96. The aluminum foil box has 2 tabs on each end that you push in to anchor the foil. Story 97. I recently learned that a strip mall is not a very large strip club. Story 98. Cheez-Its are amazing crackers for tomato soup. Story 99. I honestly read the entire Harry Potter series thinking the characters were perfects and not prefects. When I heard them say prefect in the movies, I thought, what? I then went to make sure I was not wrong and realized it does say prefect in the book. My mind was blown. I had read all 7 books thinking perfect. Story 100. I never had dishwashing gloves at home, and feeling the gunk made me hate washing dishes. My mom never bought any. Now that I'm away from home, I realized I could buy my own gloves for dishwashing, and it's so much better. I honestly don't know why I didn't do it earlier. It's a massive difference. Story 101. Life is so much better when you stop reading YouTube comments. Story 102. I am in my 50s. I grew up in a rural area north of New York City. I am a veteran and reasonably intelligent and well-traveled. I have been hearing and repeating this expression on and off my whole life. A friend or acquaintance might say, "Hey man, see you soon." The other replies, "Not if I see you first." It is almost always a joking, kind jab at the first person. It was so ritualized as a way to say goodnight to a buddy that it never occurred to me that it implied the friend would choose to avoid the other person. Story 103. In my family, we call these turnip green moments because when my mom was 30, she realized turnip greens are the green leaves of a turnip. Story 104. Just the other day, I found out it was quote-unquote and not quote-unquote. Story 105. I don't have to tell people everything on my mind or justify things. I can simply say, "No, I'm unavailable," or, for example, "Thank you. This took me hours to complete," without sabotaging a compliment or oversharing. It was a game changer. Story 106. Charles Boyle's cousin Susan, who learned to sing in her late 40s, was a reference to Susan Boyle. It took me way too long to get that one. Story 107. We live in Colorado. My wife asked why the Canadian geese did not fly south for the winter. I reminded her they are Canadian and we are already south of Canada. Story 108. It took hearing someone in a play say, "Duh, that's why they call it Monopoly," for me to realize the game is named because the goal is to monopolize the board. It blew my mind that I had not noticed it before. Story 109. Miles per hour. Miles per hour. It took an entire childhood into adulthood for me to realize that one. Story 110. The alphabet song and Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star share the same tune. They have different lyrics. Story 111. K9 stands for canine. I never realized that until today. Story 112. London Tipton in The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody is a parody of Paris Hilton. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.